Hey, what's up, YouTube? You're with gothatfunk. I sometimes see here on YouTube clips from various different news organizations in America where the pundits go on and on about how both politically and or socially the United States is going through harder times right now than it has ever had to face before. And I vigorously disagree with that kind of contention. I'm old enough to have pretty clear memories of the 1960s, particularly, of course, the second half of the 1960s. Um, the 1960s was a very turbulent decade for the USA, starting off with the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs fiasco, the murder of Medgar Evers, the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, uh, Martin Luther King, of course, and Bobby Kennedy. These political assassinations are something that we are lucky enough not to be going through right now. We had the Cold War in full swing in the 60s. We had a real on-the-ground war going on in Southeast Asia. Before it was over, tens of thousands of Americans would be killed in that war, and millions of Asians were killed in that war. We had riots all over America in the 1960s. I believe 1967 saw riots in dozens of American cities, most notably in Detroit. 1968, there were riots in more than 100 American cities, especially in the aftermath of the assassination of Martin Luther King. The 1968 Democratic National Convention saw 30,000 police confront about 10,000 demonstrators with some pretty unfortunate results. People were demonstrating against the war all across the country. Campuses were being occupied. The talk of revolution was on the lips of many young adults back in the 1960s. Plenty of people thought the country was coming apart and that the United States wouldn't survive. But you know what? The United States did survive. And I have to wonder, the people who think that we have it worse now, what their criteria is for making that kind of a judgment. Because, yeah, okay, the economy is swirling the bowl, as it were, but we're not gone yet. And yes, of course, there's a culture war going on in America, and I think that's probably been the case my entire life. So that's not going to go away anytime soon. But is it really worse than the 1960s? I don't think so, but somehow I think the music of the times makes people feel like it is. I actually should have said that differently. I'll make the point differently. Back in the 1960s, the late half of the 60s for sure, and the early part of the 70s, popular music was, by and large, very optimistic about the future and about hope for humanity in general. Songs like All You Need Is Love, or Come On People Now, Smile on Your Brother, Everybody Get Together and Love One Another Right Now. Songs of that sort of nature, and there were dozens and dozens of songs like that, were very, very optimistic about humankind and our potential for the future. And I'm wondering if we can have that kind of optimism and hope for the future so prevalent, despite the fact that there were riots and wars going on. Why is it that that kind of optimism and that kind of hope isn't really so prevalent in popular music anymore? Obviously, fewer bands nowadays make socially conscious music than they did back in the 60s and 70s. But even those that do make socially conscious music, most of it, I have to say, doesn't strike me as particularly optimistic about the future. And I wonder, is that a reflection of society, or does society reflect what's going on in pop culture to a degree, or both? But I'm curious, have you written off the future? If so, why?